What if the most dangerous prison you will ever enter has no walls, no locks, and no guards, only words, glances, and unspoken judgments that quietly dismantle who you are? Carl Jung warned that the deepest psychological traps are rarely born from visible violence. They arrive disguised in familiarity, wrapped in the softness of charm or the certainty of someone's voice. They come not with fists, but with subtle accusations, quiet distortions, and a confidence so absolute it feels impossible to resist. At first, nothing seems dangerous. A friend, a partner, a family member claims they know you better than you know yourself. Their words carry conviction, and in the silence after their claim, you pause and wonder, what if they're right? This is how the trap begins. No chains are needed because the real prison is inside your mind. A story is placed upon you like a cloak you never asked to wear. You are told what you think, what you feel, what you secretly want. Motives you never held are assigned to you, like shadows creeping over the light of your own truth. Slowly, doubt enters. Perhaps you misremembered. Perhaps you really are what they say. Bit by bit, you begin to surrender your trust in yourself. And this surrender is exactly what Jung feared most, the unconscious projection of another's shadow being forced upon your identity. The danger is subtle because it is invisible. Outwardly, nothing has changed. You still look like yourself. You still speak with your own voice. Yet, beneath the surface, a false reality is being constructed. A new narrative is written in which you are no longer the author. The longer you stay, the harder it is to distinguish your own reflection from the image imposed upon you. Jung called this state possession, not in the supernatural sense, but in the psychological sense. You have become the vessel for someone else's unacknowledged darkness. What makes this trap so treacherous is not only the distortion itself, but the way it erodes your confidence over time. It is like walking through a fog that thickens with every step. At first, you believe you can see clearly, but then the outlines of reality blur until you can no longer tell whether you are moving forward or walking in circles. Those who have experienced it often describe the same haunting feeling, that the ground beneath them has shifted and they are standing on a story that is not their own. And here is the terrifying paradox. The person projecting may genuinely believe their version of you is true. They are not always lying consciously. In Jung's words, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. To them, the distortion feels like reality, which is why no amount of explanation or evidence can set you free. This is the trap you don't see coming. It does not announce itself. It seduces with certainty, cloaks itself in intimacy, and waits for you to surrender your own truth. And once you are inside, it feels almost impossible to escape until awareness cracks the illusion. Have you ever noticed how unsettling it feels when someone speaks with absolute certainty about who you are, as if they hold the key to your soul better than you do? At first, their words may sound harmless, even insightful, like they are trying to understand you. But soon that certainty becomes suffocating. They no longer ask questions, they declare truths. They no longer seek to listen, they impose. What they see is not you, but their own shadow reflected onto your being. Carl Jung warned us of this danger. When a person projects their denied qualities onto another, they cloak it in conviction so sharp it slices into the fabric of your identity. It feels less like being understood and more like being pinned to a wall, unable to move. Consider the woman who has spent her life in a marriage where her partner insists he knows what she thinks before she speaks. When she says she is tired, he accuses her of being cold. When she asks for space, he insists she is hiding something. Slowly, her reality shrinks. She stops clarifying because explanations never land. The conviction in his voice has already written the script of her life. Or think of the child who grows up under the weight of a parent's unyielding certainty. The parent declares, "You're selfish, you only think of yourself." Yet the child is the one who sacrifices, who bends, who erases their needs for approval. Over time, that child begins to believe the lie. They carry the wound into adulthood, always questioning whether their kindness is genuine or simply a mask for the selfishness they were told was there. The tragedy of such conviction is that it leaves no room for nuance. Human beings are rivers, constantly shifting, complex, full of paradox. But in the projector's mind, you are reduced to a single stagnant image, an identity carved out of their own unacknowledged pain. The certainty in their tone is not truth, it is projection, yet it feels like a blade. It cuts into the soft flesh of who you are, leaving wounds that are hard to name because they bleed invisibly. You cannot point to bruises, but you carry the ache of being unseen. This is why Jung considered projection one of the most dangerous traps of the psyche. It is not just about someone misunderstanding you. It is about someone colonizing your inner world with their shadow. You may start to doubt yourself. What if they are right? What if this is who I am? And in that doubt, your grip on your own truth weakens. It is as though you are holding a mirror that once reflected your authentic self, but their conviction fogs it over until you see only their version of you staring back. Think of the friend who insists you are envious when you express joy for your own success, or the colleague who declares you are manipulative simply because you set a boundary. The force of their certainty can leave you paralyzed, wondering if you have been blind to your own darkness. This is the trick of the trap. The voice that defines you with absolute conviction plants seeds of doubt in your soil of authenticity, and those seeds grow into vines that choke your spirit. The climax of this red flag is often a deep fracture within. You feel torn between two realities, the one you sense inwardly, fragile but real, and the one imposed upon you, heavy and invasive. Many people in this position find themselves in silent despair, living two lives at once. Outwardly, they adapt, nodding, accepting, shrinking. Inwardly, they feel rage, grief, and confusion, but no safe place to let it live. Over time, this fracture can manifest as depression, chronic fatigue, or even illness, for the body cannot endlessly carry the weight of a stolen identity. And yet, within this darkness lies a seed of awakening. Jung believed that when we are wounded by projection, the wound itself can become an opening. The knife that cuts also reveals what is underneath. When someone defines you with absolute conviction, ask yourself, whose voice is this? Is it truly mine, or is it their shadow speaking through me? This question becomes the first act of liberation. To name the projection is to begin untangling yourself from it. Healing comes when you dare to reclaim your own inner authority. It begins quietly, with small acts of trust. Writing your own thoughts in a journal before they can be rewritten by another. Sitting in silence and listening to the subtle rhythm of your heart. Surrounding yourself with voices that ask rather than declare, that invite rather than accuse. Each step is a return to yourself, a reminder that conviction outside of you cannot override the truth within. In the end, the danger of absolute certainty is not only that it steals your reflection, but that it tempts you to forget you are the only one who can define your inner world. And the healing is this: to sharpen your own awareness, to hold fast to the symbols of your soul, and to let no blade of false conviction cut you away from who you really are. What happens when your truth becomes invisible, when no amount of proof can free you from the story someone else has written about you? This is the second stage of the trap, and it is more suffocating than the first. At this point, you may still believe that reason can rescue you, that if you explain yourself clearly enough, the fog of distortion will lift. So you offer your words carefully, you bring evidence, you tell your story from beginning to end. Yet every explanation is twisted, every fact reinterpreted, every detail turned back against you. It is as if you are speaking to a mirror that bends all light into shadows. Imagine a woman who is accused of dishonesty by her partner. She shows her messages, explains her day, and even brings witnesses to her truth. But nothing works. Each message becomes proof of her deceit, and every explanation is reframed as a cover-up. The more she defends herself, the guiltier she appears. Or think of the son who tries to convince his father that he is not lazy, that he studies late into the night. Yet the father points to his tired eyes as evidence that he wasted his time. Facts dissolve into sand in the hands of someone determined to project their own darkness onto you. This is where the cruelty of projection deepens. You are no longer merely wounded by another's conviction. You are caught in a nightmare where the very tools of liberation, truth, clarity, evidence, become your chains. Jung observed that projection is not a conscious lie. It is not manipulation in the usual sense. The projector believes their distortion. Their brain reshapes itself to hold this false image as reality. To them, your proof is not proof at all. It is only more material to weave into their illusion. This is why the trap feels so hopeless. You are not fighting dishonesty, you are wrestling with unconsciousness itself. And the more you struggle, the deeper the quicksand pulls you. You may try silence, hoping that the absence of defense will quiet the accusations. But silence becomes interpreted as admission. You may try over-explaining, laying out every detail of your innocence, yet the more you speak, the more entangled you become. It is like shouting into a storm, your words torn apart before they reach the shore. Think of the workplace where gossip spreads. One colleague accuses you of arrogance. You begin clarifying your intentions, pointing to acts of kindness, offering examples of your teamwork. But soon others whisper that your explanations are defensive, that your kindness is manipulation. No matter what you do, the narrative has already consumed you. The group begins to see you not as you are, but as the distortion insists you must be. This is how reputations are destroyed, not by truth, but by projections carried with conviction. The climax of this stage is despair. There is a moment when you realize that nothing you do will set you free in their eyes. You feel powerless, silenced, erased. To live in this state for long can fracture the soul. Many fall into depression, some into isolation, and others into physical illness. The body cannot endure endless contradiction between inner truth and outer falsehood. It begins to collapse under the strain of invisibility. Yet within this collapse lies the possibility of awakening. Jung believed that the cruelty of projection forces us to discover a power that lies beyond evidence. If truth cannot save you in their eyes, then you must anchor yourself in truth within. The shift is subtle but revolutionary. Instead of asking, "How do I make them see me clearly?" the question becomes, "How do I remain clear to myself, even if they never see me at all?" Healing begins when you stop handing your reflection to others for validation. It begins when you recognize that their blindness does not erase your light. The very failure of evidence outside teaches you to seek evidence inside. The steady rhythm of your breath, the knowledge of your intentions, the quiet reality of your integrity. These cannot be twisted because they do not belong to anyone else. Think of a man falsely accused at work. After months of fighting, he realizes he cannot change the distorted narrative. He steps back, cultivates his craft, and surrounds himself with those who see him clearly. Slowly, his sense of self returns. Not because he convinced the blind to see, but because he stopped needing their vision to confirm his own. The lesson is painful but liberating. When evidence no longer matters, you are invited to discover the deeper ground of your being. The storm of projection may rage around you, but your inner clarity can remain untouched. Jung wrote, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." And sometimes it takes the failure of external truth to awaken you to the unshakable truth within. Have you ever wondered why the smallest word, the lightest gesture, can sometimes ignite a wildfire in another person's heart? You speak casually, intending no harm, yet suddenly you are met with outrage, tears, or cold silence that feels heavier than stone. In that moment, you stand bewildered, asking yourself, "What just happened? How did my simple words create such destruction?" The truth is, they did not. What you witnessed was not a response to your action, but the eruption of a storm long brewing in their unconscious. Carl Jung observed that when the shadow is denied, it does not disappear. It festers. It waits for the slightest spark, then bursts forth with a force that feels terrifyingly disproportionate. This is what makes the emotional storm so dangerous. It convinces you that you must have caused it. In reality, the hurricane belongs to them, not you. Yet, standing in its eye, you begin to wonder if you are the problem, if perhaps your existence itself is somehow a provocation. Consider a marriage where one partner lives in constant vigilance. A comment as innocent as, "Did you lock the door?" turns into an explosion. Accusations of distrust, claims of criticism, tears about never being enough. The simple question was not about the door at all. It was about old wounds, forgotten betrayals, and unhealed fear carried in the shadows. Or imagine a workplace where a manager misinterprets a colleague's silence as rebellion. What was quiet thoughtfulness becomes a perceived act of disrespect. The manager erupts, and the colleague is left stunned, accused of hostility that never existed. These storms do not reveal the truth about you. They reveal what the other has hidden from themselves. The emotional storm is a projection of the inner volcano. It is centuries of silence erupting in one moment, ancient pain wearing the mask of present anger. Jung explained that emotions out of proportion to the event are signs of unconscious material rising. When someone's reaction far exceeds the stimulus, it is not you they are seeing. It is their own shadow projected upon you as if you were the canvas of their hidden fears. But here is the subtle cruelty of the storm. When it strikes again and again, you begin to shrink. You tell yourself, "If I am careful enough, quiet enough, invisible enough, maybe the storm will not come." You tiptoe through conversations, edit your words, hold back your laughter, suppress your opinions. Slowly, your authenticity dissolves, not because you did anything wrong, but because you were made to believe that being yourself is dangerous. This is how the storm erodes confidence. It is not the shouting or the tears alone that wound you. It is the silent conclusion you draw in the aftermath. I must be the problem. And once that thought takes root, it grows into shame. Shame whispers that your joy is too much, your presence too loud, your truth too heavy. Shame convinces you that love must be earned through self-erasure. Yet healing begins the moment you recognize the storm for what it truly is, not a reflection of your essence, but of theirs. The emotional storm belongs to the one who cannot hold their own shadow. You are not responsible for their eruption. You are only responsible for how you anchor yourself when the winds rise. Imagine yourself as a tree in the middle of a tempest. The branches may bend, the leaves may tear, but the roots remain. Your roots are your awareness, your boundaries, your unshakable truth. When the storm comes, you breathe, you ground, you remind yourself, this wave is not mine. I do not need to carry it. By doing this, you break the hidden agreement that projection demands, that you accept responsibility for another's unconsciousness. Real healing often begins in these very storms. For some, it is the breaking point. A woman once told Jung that years of being the target of such storms finally pushed her into therapy. She had lost her laughter, her voice, her light. But through the work of shadow integration, she discovered that she had been confusing another's chaos with her own worth. That realization was the first crack of light in her long night. The storms of others teach us something essential about individuation. They show us where our boundaries must grow stronger, where our inner voice must become louder than the thunder outside. They teach us to distinguish between our true reflection and the distorted image projected onto us. And most importantly, they force us to ask, will I let another's shadow define me, or will I stand rooted in my own light? At its climax, the storm can feel unbearable. You may feel like a child again, trapped in an adult's rage, desperate for calm that never comes. But this is also the gateway to transformation. Because once you see that the storm is not yours, once you realize you cannot prevent it by being smaller, you stop bargaining with the wind. You stop collapsing to please. You stand, you breathe, you endure. And in that endurance lies freedom. The storm does not end because you control it. It ends because you no longer confuse it with yourself. As Jung wrote, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. When you refuse to mistake another's unconsciousness for your fate, you reclaim the power that was always yours. So when the next storm rises, ask yourself, is this truly mine to carry? If the answer is no, let the winds rage, let the rain fall. Know that even as branches bend, your roots are deep, and no storm can uproot the self that finally knows its own ground. Why is it that some people carry the same story wherever they go, as if dragging an old, tattered script from one stage to the next? They walk into friendships, marriages, workplaces, and communities, and though the faces around them change, the tale remains identical. They were betrayed, they were misunderstood, they were wronged. Always the wounded one, never the accountable one. But look closely, and you will see what Jung saw. This is not simply misfortune. It is a repeating psychological drama, one in which you may be unknowingly cast as the villain. At first, it might appear as compassion to listen. You sit with them as they recount the endless betrayals, an ex-partner who never truly loved them, colleagues who conspired against them, family members who never gave enough. You may even feel honored to be the one they can confide in. But slowly, a strange unease begins to creep in. Every story ends the same way, and every story positions them at the powerless center. The details change, but the narrative does not. And one day, almost without realizing it, you wake up to find you have been written into their script. You are no longer the confidant, but the antagonist, the new betrayer, the fresh disappointment. This is not a coincidence. Jung described it as the unconscious repetition of a shadow script. The projector cannot face its own unacknowledged shadow, so it hands you the role. If they cannot accept their own anger, you will be cast as the aggressor. If they cannot face their own fear of abandonment, you will become the one who abandons. In their mind, they are not acting. They are reliving. You are no longer yourself. You are a character in their unhealed wound. Think of a woman who spends her life in relationships where she is always used and discarded. She tells the same story with different partners, each one selfish, each one cruel, yet she never asks why she keeps choosing those who mirror her unacknowledged self-worth issues. Instead, each new partner eventually becomes the next villain. Or consider a man who moves from job to job, each time claiming to be sabotaged by others. His supervisors change, his colleagues change, but somehow betrayal follows him like a shadow. He cannot see that the storm is within, so he drags it into every room he enters. The danger for you, the listener, the friend, the partner, is subtle but devastating. You are lured into sympathy, and then one day you are placed in the dock, accused of crimes you never committed. A neutral action, a late reply, a forgotten detail becomes evidence of betrayal. You are no longer innocent. You are the next chapter in their endless victimhood. But here lies the deeper wound. When you are pulled into their story, you begin to question yourself. You wonder, am I really so careless? Did I fail them in ways I never saw? And in that questioning, you risk losing your own clarity. This is how the eternal victim pulls others into their orbit. Their unconscious need for validation demands a villain, and once you are close enough, you are recruited. Yet there is a path toward healing, both for you and for them, though it rarely begins with the victim. Jung reminded us that until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. The eternal victim is living under the tyranny of fate disguised as a story. Their healing begins only when they dare to see the common denominator in all their dramas, themselves. But your healing begins when you recognize the trap for what it is and refuse to play the role assigned. Refusing does not mean cruelty, it means boundaries. It means recognizing when compassion has turned into captivity. It means stepping out of the script and saying, "This story is not mine to carry." It means refusing to accept the mantle of villain in someone else's unfinished play. And it means reclaiming your own narrative, one not written by another's unhealed shadow, but by your conscious choice. If you have ever been pulled into such a drama, you know how exhausting it can be. You give, you explain, you defend, but the accusations only deepen. The more you try to prove your innocence, the more tightly you are woven into their story. It is like quicksand. The more you struggle, the deeper you sink. And yet, the only real escape is stillness. To stop performing in their script altogether. The climax of this trap is not the false accusation itself. It is the moment you realize that you have lost yourself in the effort to be seen as good in someone else's eyes. That moment can feel like devastation, but it is also liberation. For it is then that you awaken to a deeper truth. You were never meant to play their villain, nor their savior. You were meant to be yourself, whole and sovereign. So if you find yourself inside the eternal victim's story, ask, whose lines am I reciting? Whose play am I performing in? And when you hear the echo of a script that is not yours, dare to put the script down, walk off the stage, step back into the authenticity of your own life. Because the greatest healing is not found in playing another's part, but in reclaiming your own voice. And in doing so, you silently invite them too, to confront the only antagonist they have ever truly known, the shadow within themselves. Have you ever felt the chilling moment when not just one person misjudges you, but an entire group begins to look at you through suspicious eyes? It starts subtly, like a whisper moving through the walls of a house you once called safe. Someone says, "I'm worried about them. Something doesn't feel right." The words are small, but they ripple outward. Soon, others are repeating the same unease, not because they see the truth themselves, but because they have absorbed a distorted lens. What began as one projection now multiplies, spreading like fire through dry grass. And before you realize it, you are no longer battling one person's shadow. You are facing an entire crowd possessed by a false story. This is one of the most terrifying dynamics Jung warned us about: collective possession. The psyche does not operate only in individuals, it also breathes in groups. When a group becomes infected with projection, reason vanishes. It is no longer about you as a person, it is about the story they have unconsciously agreed upon. And once the crowd has chosen its villain, facts become irrelevant. They see what they have been told to see, and every word, every gesture you make seems to confirm their suspicion. You are no longer yourself in their eyes. You have become an archetype, the betrayer, the dangerous one, the outsider. Consider the workplace where one colleague begins whispering doubts about another. A subtle suggestion is planted. They don't really care about the team, or they're hiding something. At first it seems like idle gossip, harmless chatter, but soon others echo the concern, and the person once respected becomes the subject of uneasy stares and quiet avoidance. Projects are reassigned, invitations stop arriving, and the circle slowly closes, leaving them standing outside. They are still the same person, but the group no longer sees them. They see only the shadow that has been projected onto them. Or imagine a family where one sibling begins spinning a narrative about another. She's selfish. She always thinks of herself. At first, the words seem like venting, but gradually, parents, cousins, and relatives begin nodding in agreement. At gatherings, conversations shift. The accused sibling feels the weight of the room turn colder. No matter what they do, acts of kindness, words of love, it all seems to be reinterpreted as further proof of the accusation. What once was a home of belonging now feels like exile. Jung understood this process not only as a psychological mechanism, but as something archetypal, almost mythic. The crowd that turns on an individual is the same ancient pattern seen in scapegoating rituals, witch hunts, and betrayals of prophets. The one who carries the projection becomes the bearer of the group's disowned darkness. In a sense, the group achieves unity, but only by sacrificing the truth of one person. The danger here is not only in the injustice you suffer, but also in the erosion of your inner ground. When so many voices align against you, doubt seeps in. You ask yourself, if everyone sees me this way, could they be right? Am I blind to my own faults? This is the cruelest part of collective possession. It makes you mistrust your own reality. What began as someone else's projection becomes a poison you drink yourself. Yet within this danger lies a profound moment of awakening. For if you can hold steady in the storm, refusing to abandon your own inner knowing, you discover a strength that cannot be taken by numbers or noise. The healing path is not to argue harder or to gather counter-allies. The healing path is to stand rooted in your authenticity, even when others cannot or will not see it. This is the essence of individuation, to live from the truth of the self, not the shifting opinions of the crowd. History is full of those who endured this fire. Think of the scientist whose discoveries were mocked, only to be recognized decades later as a genius. Think of the artist whose vision was rejected by their own generation, yet celebrated by the next. Think of the countless men and women throughout time who refused to betray their inner truth, even when communities branded them mad, dangerous, or delusional. Their strength was not in winning over the crowd, but in refusing to abandon themselves. In our everyday lives, we may not face witch hunts or trials, but the dynamics are the same. To be misjudged by friends, shunned at work, or quietly excluded by family cuts just as deep. The wound is not only rejection, but the feeling of being unseen in your essence. Yet here lies the hidden task: to anchor yourself so deeply in your own center that even collective possession cannot uproot you. To remember Jung's wisdom that the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. So if you ever find yourself in this storm, when the crowd turns and the whispers grow loud, pause, breathe. Remember that their story does not define you. It is a mirror of their own unconscious fear, not a reflection of your soul. Do not drink their projection as your truth. Instead, let the fire burn away the last need for external validation. Let it strip you back to the essence that no crowd can erase. And from that essence, you rise. Not as the villain they imagined, nor even as the victim they tried to make you. You rise as yourself, whole, unbroken, and free. And in that rising, you become what the crowd fears most and secretly longs for: a person who cannot be possessed by the shadows of others. If this touched something sacred inside you, don't let it fade into silence. Like this video, subscribe, and turn on notifications. Your presence here is not just support, it's resonance. And if you feel moved to give back, your donation becomes a quiet but powerful gesture that helps keep this light alive for others still walking in the dark.